スクエア・エニックス代表取締役社長松田洋介です。というのはどうでしょう。社長です。社長です。社長です。
Matsuda's gone. Matsuda's gone. He gone. Long gone. Good smacky. Alright, pheasant. I said pheasants. Alright, pheasants, how you doing? I need to reposition, man. God damn it. Bloody like weird antler lights, not actual antlers. Well, an actual deer hasn't died for that, but god damn is it garish. Just wanted to check in, sign in, and actually cover this Matsuda getting ditched story. We've got a new CEO of Square Enix coming, and yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions around why Matsuda's left. Honestly, it's not what people think, and it's definitely not what they want. Even when I told Gingy Boy and my other mate, who he vaguely knows Matsuda and Square Enix, even he said, the NFT guy is going. The guy who's going into blockchain and metaverse. They're kicking him out to go into a new direction. Great, they're listening to the fans, because there definitely was on a lot of Square Enix streams a big sentiment. I mean, I saw it a lot. They need to replace management, get Matsuda out. It's happened. Matsuda is standing down. Takashi Kiryu will take the role pending approval at the next annual shareholder meeting. It'll be the 43rd one. And even the article that I'm reading that from is headline Square Enix's president is on his way out and fans are hoping that NFTs go with him. I'm just going to say straight out the gate, guys, it ain't. It really ain't. Takashi Kiryu, this dude has worked as a general manager before coming to Square Enix, because he's only been there a couple years. He previously, 2 years ago, came from Dentsu Innovation Innovative, a business group exploring exciting opportunities in, can you bloody well guess it, the metaverse.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
He is a Web3 guru who absolutely believes that despite the historic crashes, similar to Matsuda, that NFTs are going to be a thing of the future, and that the 90% crash that we've seen, like this is the time to get in, which I said in those previous videos, they're not wrong, guys. I know what most of you think, that when something drops, because this has happened with Bitcoin, for every single crash that has happened, when it goes down 80-90%, people go, it's a scam, I knew it was a scam, and then it proceeds to go up 5,000-6,000%. And then everyone goes, oh shit, how did I miss that? If only I could go back in a time machine. I'd go back in a time machine and I'd just buy 100 Bitcoin and I would now be worth something in the region of $600 million. I'd nearly be a billionaire. This story has happened time and time again, and yeah, it's just market psychology. When something crashes, everyone thinks it's worthless. But historically, it's the time to get in. Now, that's not to say that's necessarily what's going to be the case with NFTs, with blockchain gaming. The backlash and the resistance to it really might be so absolute, so resolute, that it never manages to squeeze its way through. But something in me just doubts that. Really, when I do the next video after this, guys, the Wolf EOS video, 15 A New Empire got a sequel, something just tells me that it really doesn't matter, and especially when you look at the rest of the game, when you look at like microtransactions, when you look at the other business practices, and by and large, and as much as I hate it, guys, I think that the sentiment that Square Enix are riding on, and also a lot, because there's a lot of other game devs getting into this space and keeping their eye on it, including Machine Zone, developers of that Shitington 15 A New Empire game. They're hedging. There's a lot of people hedging on blockchain gaming, on the Web3 space as a whole. And yeah, I kind of side on the logic of, eventually when the backlash dies down and these things normalize, that these are the guys who are going to be making bare dollar of it. And that is very much what this new CEO, do not get confused, guys. This guy is here to continue that trend. I mean, even in the sign-out letter, it said, under the rapid change of business environments around the entertainment industry, the proposed change of CEOs, this is intended to reshape the management team with the goal of adopting ever-evolving technological innovations and maximizing on the creativity. It's that bit right there. Adopting ever-evolving technologies. What do you think they're talking about with that? They are talking about cloud. And not the usual kind that they whore at. Not cloud strife. No, cloud gaming, AI, blockchain games. I mean, damn, talk about AI. This is the guy. He freaking looks like an AI. He looks like he was crafted in a lab. Some sort of Asian MT Kendall merger. I don't know, man. This guy just doesn't. He doesn't look real. 48 years old. Well, when I first saw him, you know in the crypto space, you know the dump pit. Dump pit. He just gives me 95% like silicon and actual only like 5% organic biomatter. Like that is what constitutes this guy's corporeal form that he just happens to be inhabiting currently. Man, that's low. I don't know. That's immature. I don't know. I shouldn't be roasting the guy on his looks. That's some bottom of the barrel shit right there. But yeah, and fans were in the comment section have said I'm not expecting anything better, only worse. Hope for the best, expect the worst. And then there's just a bunch of like good riddance to Matsuda. I love talks about NFTs and how they're going to be gone. I did like Tradlad's comment. He said NFT and live service mobile endeavours aside, Square Enix traditional game output has been really strong the last couple of years. I actually kind of agree. When you actually look at the list, like the Valkyrie series, Star Ocean, Octopath, Deerfield, Harvestella, Bravely Default, Dragon Quest games, No Stranger of Paradise 7 Remake, Crash Core Union, Melody of Memories, Final Bar Line now, Live a Live, Tactics, Ogre, Trials of Mana, Near Replicant. Like, it's been an alright list, man. And I know 14 chugging it and 16. There is a lot to be positive with Square Enix, in my opinion. Still, and even with Matsuda, I just want to say, in my opinion, what my opinion is and as to why he's really gone. For me, very simply, his indecisiveness on whether Square Enix needed to lean into their Japanese strengths, their cultural storytelling, lean into that market, cater to the Japanese audience, or just have the confidence that what the Japanese audience wanted was also what there was a big appetite in the West for. Matsuda just was such a conflicted individual on wanting to open Square Enix to a broader market, the Western markets, and replicate some of the success that massive, predominantly open world games were having. And not just open world games, but a lot of Western games that were also being turned into these ever expanding, ongoing, multi-DLC, live service structured behemoth universes unto themselves, rather than just singular games and a singular price tag. And we saw it. Matsuda, he was the one who was at the helm when it came to transitioning Versus 13 into 15. That was on his watch. Everything with Eidos Montreal, Crystal Dynamics, on his watch. Everything in the Deus Ex and the Hitman series. I mean, Hitman was the clearest. Matsuda is a really big Hitman fan, and going back to some of his old interviews, like Matsuda in 2017 was talking about how he personally loves the game, thinks it's very unique, but I always have to look at things from the perspective of what it costs us to develop it and the performance it delivers. In doing that, in the case of Hitman, with several expectations where that balance was not sufficiently achieved. Whether it's our Western studios or Japan studios at Square Enix, we sometimes end up with conflicts or shortages in terms of resources. I felt if that we were not able to continue sufficiently investing in Hitman, it would wind up ruining the game. So we found ourselves in a difficult position. Although Hitman was well received, when we thought about having to invest in a second or a third season, we decided that would be quite challenging. And yeah, they ditched out of it. Even when they went on to sell the studio, they lost 43 mil. They ditched it off, taking an extraordinary loss. So the investment required for Hitman 2 and 3 must have been significant, leading to that decision. And this was all happening, even though Matsuda loved it, and he was talking even back as far then as there being this vying of money and resources between Japan and the West. He was still at this point putting considerable development resources into Western studios to ensure the Marvel game lived up to expectations. Well, we know how that went, guys. Stanked. Deus Ex not do so great, and now of course we've just seen Forspoken, and that's it, guys. That's really it, isn't it? That's why Matsuda has stood down. I kind of had my suspicions when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, in early 2017 and even back as far as 2015. Where was it? Here we go. June 30th, 2015. Square Enix Japan and its Western arm are a perfect fusion, says CEO Yosuke Matsuda. According to him, the two companies now exist in perfect harmony, despite working to maintain the unique identity of their individual component studios. It's been 6 years at our booth as well as our conference. You can see we are one at this point, essentially.
I'm sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
In terms of treatment and how we engaged with those studios, it's not any different, he said, from how we engage with the Tokyo development staff. And one thing about our company is that a lot of these studios, not just IDOS, but all of our Tokyo studios, they all have distinct qualities and are unique in their own ways. And we try to draw on those qualities. I think this is important in understanding why Matsuda is now out, because this was the biggest part of his narrative, was playing off that this, you know, moving into the West, and it was the same with the Luminous engine and the creation of it. It was all of his dialogue. We're going to create an engine to quote unquote take down the West. First it started as a competition to the West, to compete with them, to match them, to rival them, and then of course that started evolving into needing to then bring in Western developers, hire Western staff, outsource to various Western companies. I say it and I say it again, Final Fantasy 15, it had something like 300 external companies developing on it at one point. It got so bloated because, yeah, Square Enix were operating out of their wheelhouse, and they recruited a lot of outside influence. We know how it went with 15, I don't need to say it again, but you know, it was no clearer to me than when Tabata, with like a haunted, dead expression, like dead eyes, having to basically explain why 15 was more about this road trip experience, aka this foray through this world, driving in this open world environment. That was the premise of, like, that was the heart of the game, and it was no longer about the story. Oh, you know the story thing, like people usually come to Final Fantasy for you. No, we decided to go with simple and simplistically presented, because we want this to be both for Final Fantasy fans and first timers. I mean, that was the motto of 15 were now. What they meant by first timers was Westerners who don't give a single flying shit about RPGs. Tabata was the first one to say, fuck this shit. He was the first one, the victim, the main director that this all coalesced around. Yes, we had Versus 13, we had a traditionally styled, traditional aesthetic, and a Final Fantasy, yes, darker, more mature, more gritty, but the Japanese storytelling and the narrative was clear as freaking day in that game, and the format was too. And we saw it. We saw Luminous Studios get created, and I said from day one, so I'm just going to mention, of course, Matsuda getting folded at this point is because Luminous Productions just got folded. Back into Square Enix, yes, it's great that no developers are losing their jobs, but there's no way the new CEO would have got away with firing anyone from that division, because there's still a lot of Japanese workers in that, and it's mostly the Japanese side that has, I believe, felt like they've had really big beef with the latest decision, that capital and resources and investment have been getting catapulted over the seas. A huge section of the Luminous Productions teams, I mean the story writers on Forspoken were Western and white writers. And this is the thing with Matsuda, he has such contradictory back and forth commentary on this, making reference to trying to keep their cultural identity, but then also really fanboying and hyping up like these Western arms that are coming into the catalogue, and a lot of those can be traced back into 2009. In the acquisition of IDOS, that was in 2009. So this isn't all Matsuda. We also have to give him some credit. This is exactly the same kind of thing that pissed me off with the Squaresoft versus Square Enix argument. They said that it was Square Enix that were the ones who created sequels and prequels and reusing assets. And as you know, Final Fantasy X-2 was being made during Squaresoft. Enix just took it over, but it was already going ideologically in that direction anyway. So I want to be fair and say that Matsuda fits in that same category. The Western endeavours had already started, and of course he had to kind of be a hype man for it. He had to praise and encourage its successes. This is what Matsuda's POV for success was in what was kind of a tricky transitional period for the company. You know, he was also very forthcoming in saying that, yeah, Japan are struggling to kind of adapt to the new trends that are really blowing up in gaming. And at one point, let's be real, like open world, people still have a fetish for it now, but the level, the intensity of like fetish that existed for open world games over the 2010s, I mean, it got insane at some point. A game was basically slated or praised before it even came out based on the size and the scale of it. I remember when they came out and they told us how big 15's world map would be. Like, oh, all right, day one buy. Day one buy. I don't need to say anymore. It's that big. I'm in. Road trip experience, the traversal through this open world that is supposed to be magical and high fantasy, but it's kind of lifeless and earthen and dead and empty, and to tell us that that's where the heart of this game resides and not so much in the storytelling. The storytelling has to be simple and simplistically presented. Yes, you guys have heard me requote that particular statement a million times, but for me that was them. That was the knife in the heart. It was that moment, that interview. I knew Luminous was fucked. I knew it was something that stood as antithetical to what I love about the series. I knew it stood against what made Square Enix a great company and what us fans went to them for, what was refreshingly different about them. It was at that moment I knew that no matter what they did with Luminous Engine, no matter how much they fleshed it out, refined it, enhanced it, no matter if all the kinks, that we saw Tabata have to, surmount with all of these external developers at the expense of the release window of the game, and fans having to be dragged through 3-4 demos and 10-12 trailers and years and years and years of broken promises, and quickly even that point on 15 being a game as a service. In this interview back in 2017, games as a service has a very wide meaning. This is Matsuda. It can mean a lot of things. Recently, people have been discussing loot boxes and people not using that properly. I think it's all linked to this bad perception people have to the word game as a service. But really, the way we're looking at it, what it boils down to is the idea of keeping people engaged with our games, enjoying them for longer periods of time. That's what we're really looking at. It's the idea that you have a game released and you keep adding more content to keep the players engaged and enjoying the game, and what helps make it a more full experience. That right there sums up Matsuda. Nothing burger, double speak, where it's clear we know what you're saying now. We know what you're getting at. I mean, even in terms of the discussion around resources, he was so back and forth on trying to support both the Western arm, but make it seem like he was still very much like upholding the identity of Square Enix and what the individuals, the long-running individuals Square Enix, like what they wanted. That was no clearer than the Tokyo RPG Factory when that got formed. The way Matsuda did that is there was a growing discontent with the lack of representation of mainline singular RPGs that a lot of people in the company loved doing and they were known for. So he basically sent out this thing saying, okay, well, I'll get a bunch of volunteers. Does anyone volunteer to create their own game company? Loads of people at Square Enix came forward and he said to them, okay, well, you guys get to make your own company name. What do you want to be called? Tokyo RPG Factory. Like, they couldn't have made it any clearer. That's what we want to do. Japan RPG, Japan RPG, JRPG is just a cry to just create JRPGs. And I know on that front, Matsuda used the word JRPG a lot. I know Yoshida just did an interview saying that he finds that term offensive. I didn't really read that article, so I don't know the full ins and outs of that. But yeah, what is your primary aim with Tokyo RPG Factory? Is it to placate old gamers with old school style games, or attract newer gamers that maybe discovered these style of games on mobiles, like new style? Matsuda came out and said it's both. It's definitely both. So more or less, while he's allowing sort of Tokyo RPG Factory to actually do what this group of volunteers want to do, he still had in his head, but we've got to pander and cater to the West, we've got to pander and cater to new technologies. The only way that we can survive is if we model our games to Western appeal. And the thing that I don't understand with Matsuda is he knew very early on that this was not what was going to be successful for Square Enix. Just why Matsuda's dialogue was, it was never honest, it was never sincere. Him saying everything was like beautiful, joyous harmony between the two arms. Not true, not true. Stefan de Astus, founder and former boss of Deus Ex developer Eidos Montreal, has described Square Enix's handling of its Western studio as a train wreck in slow motion. More or less that they came on, it was a trajectory that could have been predicted. I left because things were missing at head office. Pre-Square Enix, Eidos had a great tradition of development teams, but they don't have superior knowledge of how to sell the games, and that was quite clear. So bringing on Square Enix, they thought that Square Enix would really have something to offer. It was clear that there were great IPs that were sleeping on the shelf. Legacy of Kain that was discussed, although that wasn't as strong as Deus Ex and Thief. With Thief we did our best and we struggled, and that's life in development in games. We recorded a tense period where Square Enix said it was disappointed in the company's financial performance. It had been due to turn a 65 million profit despite not having any deliverables that year. We were dumbfounded, Astor said. The pressure was starting to build, and my employees towards me, towards my superiors. I think when people are in a crisis situation, where there's a lot of situations, you do see their core behaviours or values. And I did not like what I saw. There was a real lack of leadership, courage, communication, and when you don't have those things, no employee can do their job correctly. I was losing hope that Square Enix Japan would bring great things to Eidos. I was losing confidence in my headquarters in London. In the annual fiscal reports, Japan always added, and this is the telling bit for me, guys, added one or two phrases saying, we were disappointed with certain games, they didn't reach expectations. And they did that strictly for certain games that were done outside of Japan. It was then that Daustus realised Square Enix was not as committed as he had hoped to its Western studios, and that he has heard rumours of an interest from Sony in buying the company, but only its Japanese portions. The article goes on to more or less say that, the way that they sold it off was more or less like a garage sale, and that's pretty much everything I confirmed all of my suspicions, more or less, guys, is that there was a growing resentment within Japan, the Japanese studios. These resources and revenue was going over to the Western side. Those were just hitting brick walls after brick walls, just losses after losses, flops after flops, and Japan was blaming. They was resentful. They were resentful of these external studios. Why do you think there's been such a heavy axe job done across that entire arm of Square Enix? What do you think? I mean, it even shocked me. I kind of knew that Luminous Productions was going to get folded, but to see it get folded this freaking quickly, like Forspoken, only just hit the shelves. Right? Was it a couple months ago? If that at this point, and to see it already being sent to the gallows, they knew it. They knew it. And for me, at least, I reckon Matsuda, he was the one who was trying to broker this Eastern Western merge. I think it was a case that neither side wanted to work with the other. Neither side was bringing any value to the other. I truly do think that Matsuda he lived and died on this idea that the Western style of doing things and the Eastern side, that they could contribute things together, and that it would create this whole new amazing foray of magical innovation. And it just wasn't the case. It was just the case that they are diametrically opposed game styles, development styles, product styles, teams, ethoses, ideologies. When he poured attention and resources into one side, he took it away and diminished it from another. I definitely just knew that his time was up when all of a sudden his narrative shifted. Before it was, the West and the East, they can sort of merge and create something new and amazing. Suddenly he released that article, or that interview, I think it was 6 months ago, or a year ago now, all of a sudden saying, Japan will not, Square Enix will not survive if they copy the West. We need to stop mimicking Western games. And when I saw that, I remember my head snapping. Whoa, Matsuda, you've learned, you've got it. Hells to the yeah, man. And he did that whole interview saying, they need to keep their identity, they need to go back to their roots. We saw that already happening with the restructuring of the company, the cutting of the outsourced companies, the selling off of the Western studios. And to hear him also then say that, what that tells me is that the resentment had grown. It was deeply lodged in the company. He knew his time was up, and he started reversing the narratives. Started trying to reverse the damage. He knew Forspoken was gonna flop. Everyone fucking knew that game was gonna flop, man. I said it was gonna get 3.7 before it came out. It got 3.4. Look, over the last year and a half, and Sonny Matsuda's changed his wording. He knew it was time to was up, and he was trying to play off that these sort of Western endeavours weren't largely held up and supported and endorsed by him, not necessarily created by him, but certainly held up. And kind of go, oh, it wasn't my idea. Let's sell the fucking studios quickly. Fucking, I'm going to say, like, yeah, we need to do us. We need to do Japan. I'm Team Japan. Team Japan. He tried to mitigate the damage, in my opinion, to no success. And when Forspoken went under, they were like, yep, you're donezo, man. You're donezo. And it is a bit of a shame because I do feel like there was a moment in time. So finishing off, guys, there was a moment in 2014 where I feel like he knew. He had a moment of epiphany, and rather than take the lesson and run with it, he turned his back on it. Because it was interesting for me to see that in 2014, Matsuda came out in an interview saying that Bravely Default's success in the West is making Square Enix rethink their JRPGs. During an interview with Nikkei, Matsuda was asked if they have any global titles for smartphones in the mix of all their upcoming new games. To which he said, not just limited to games for smartphones or console, but we do have some global titles lined up. However, regardless of whether they're smartphone or console, there's a difficult element to developing global titles. So we'll be making them without focusing too much on the global aspect. And this came after an epiphany that, for example, in the past, when we developed console games with a worldwide premise, 15, like Forspoken, like Babylon's Fall, like the Avengers, we lost our focus. And not only did they end up being games that weren't for the Japanese, but they ended up being incomplete titles that weren't fit for a global audience at all. Yes! Yes, Matsuda! Spot on! He got it. He knew it back then. This is in 2014. Like, yes, when you try to create like a game that's going to appeal to everyone, it's like a politician who wants to like create a tent that is going to appeal to everybody to the point it ends up appealing to nobody. Because it doesn't stand for anything. It's so wishy-washy, it's so amorphous, it doesn't really stamp or like lean into anything like brave or strong. It's just watery mush. It's just like what Charlie from Willy Wonka was serving his bloody grandpa. It's cabbage soup, man. It's cabbage soup, like, yeah, it'll nourish you. Like, no one is gonna have like an allergic reaction or die to a bit of cabbage soup, but no one's also gonna love it, man. And he got it. They're no, trying to create a global concept game that they could end up losing themselves. And he said this even in another interview, that he called it blurry, getting blurry, losing focus on what our strengths are. He said this in multiple interviews. Matsuda continues, on the other hand, there are games like the JRPG we made for the Japanese audience with the proper elements, Bravely Default. So they made this for the Japanese audience. They put all the ingredients, all the elements, all the bells and the whistles that would really appeal to a Japanese audience. But then it surprised us to see they ended up selling all around the world. No, would you believe it? People actually like Square Enix for the Japanese element that they bring into their RPGs. Who would have guessed it? I mean, the fact that this surprised, but both surprised and shocked, the fact that not only Square Enix had lost direction or knowing of that, which still baffles me because there's nothing to really explain why that would be. Everything that had still come out prior to that had been a success. 10 had been a success. 11 had been a success. 12 had been a success. A lot of the other games even surrounding that era, like, yeah, you could still say that Bravely Default was kind of mid-range. Sold over 200,000 copies in its first week, so it's not a AAA title. But yeah, that really, really surprised them. And yes, this next part ran out of this video that like really hits the nail on the coffin. Matsuda had it and then somehow missed it. Due to having split, by split he means the development mindset, according to regions around the world, we weren't able to see this clearly up until now. That fans of JRPGs are really spread around the world. Through the means of various networks, the latest information that is announced in Japan is instantly being spread across fans throughout the world. So in this moment he realised, like, wow, like JRPG is actually kind of global and there's a global appeal for it now, so there's a strong market for it. He even said, with that in mind, taking into account all of those collective fans, there's a sense of mass, which loses the image of a niche market, continues Matsuda. For the new games we'll be developing from this point on, while this may sound a bit extreme, we've been talking about making them as heavy JRPGs. Heavy JRPGs. This is wild, man. I hadn't even read this far into this article. I believe that way we can better focus on our target, which will also bring better results. You were right, Matsuda. How did this happen? Oh my god, if you focus, yeah, he says, if you focus too much on the global aspect, you might lose sight of who you're actually making the game for. For example, if you look back at 2013, we've had some home console games made for a global audience that struggled. This is just so, like, it's not even hindsight 2020. It's like he was telling his own fortune. He was palm reading himself with this. Because he even mentions here, the development team for Hitman Absolution really struggled in this regard. They implemented as a vast amount of elements for the masses instead of for the core fans as a way to try getting as many new players as possible. It was a strategy to gain mass appeal. However, what makes the Hitman series good is appeal to core gamers. And many fans felt that the lack of focus and regard is what ended up making it struggle in sales. To then see that Matsuda, 3 years after that, would end up killing Hitman, in Square Enix himself, personally, for more or less the same reason. Wild man. Anyway, he concludes, so as for the AAA titles that we're currently developing, so you basically want to go back to the roots, focus on core audience while working hard on content. They can say to fans like, this is Hitman, we know. I believe this is the best way for our studio to display their strengths. And that right there, my friends, is the conflicting, contradicting story of Matsuda. It's a wild one. It's a wild one. It's like he knew, but once he stepped into power, and once he was the big man making the big decisions, yeah, he lost that focus. He lost that direction. He did believe that he had to kind of balance these both arms, and this was necessary. And despite, and it was maddening to me, and I'm sure to you guys as fans as well. Whenever we looked and we went over their financial reports, it was always the same thing. 14 carrying their books. Kingdom Hearts 7 remake, 15. I mean, despite that being bastardized and westernized and becoming that wishy-washy, the exact thing he's talking about, that wishy-washy thing that had lost its focus, is still so tight, 10 million sales. It still held the company afloat. To see still, despite how many years of glaring evidence of what fans wanted and what was successful, that they just stubbornly pushed on and doubled down on Western turds. No other way to put it. Whitewashed, stanky turds. Anyway guys, there it is. There's the story. I think I didn't have that mic on for the last section, so the audio may have been freaking weird. And yeah, they're still not going to learn the lesson. Yeah, they're going to be branching off into crazy new technologies. That's what the new CEO is going to be doing. Though before that is absolutely blockchain. There's absolutely AI, cloud service. And also it will be games as a service. Of that, I feel pretty confident as well. I can't say for absolute certain, but hear me now, quote me later. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Was Matsuda the big boogeyman in the closet who needed to go? The one to blame for all of Square Enix's misdirections over the last decade? Or do you think he was just kind of a dude navigating choppy, uncertain, kind of unforgiving waters and gaming markets and attempting to bring about a new direction for Square Enix and the company that, try as they might, just didn't work out? And we should just salute him. Salute Matsuda and say, alright mate, thank you for your service. The experiment failed. You were right back in 2014. Let's get back to heavy J's in our RPGs. Let me know. Until the next video. Hoo-ho!